Hi, look, movie recaps here. Today I'm going to explain an American biographical comedy drama film. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. The movie begins in the year 1962. Here we see an Italian-American doorman named Tony. He works at the Copacabana nightclub in the Bronx. On his job, he deals with impolite clients all the time, but he doesn't hesitate to deal with them when they violate the club's code. When a rich businessman pays them a visit one day, he stresses that his mother gave him the hat, so he urges the reception to keep it carefully. Tony makes the businessman go crazy on the employees when he stole the previously mentioned hat. Later on, he returns it while pretending to have obtained it from a thief. He makes the businessman a buddy in addition to receiving money as a result of the gesture. Tony and his friends are upset that the club will be closed for renovations for the next 2 months. To ensure their families have food, they must seek a part-time work. 2 African-American guys visit Tony's home the next day to fix the kitchen sink. Given that it is the 1960s, racism frequently targets the African-American community in the United States. Dolores is quite friendly and doesn't give a damn about their color. She even extends an offer of water to them before graciously waving them off. When Tony realizes this, he throws the glasses they drank from as soon as they depart. He doesn't give it much thought because at the time, society was accustomed to seeing such covert but obvious racist behavior. After some time, Tony receives a call from one of his associates one day while he is still hunting for work. The source informs him of a doctor named Don Shirley, who is in need of a driver. Don is an African-American man, as Tony discovers when he visits his home for an interview the very next day. In addition to being a well-known pianist, he holds a doctorate in psychology and music. It surprises Tony to learn that Don is the owner of such an opulent lifestyle, as he has never witnessed one before. Don is needed as the pianist driver for an 8-week performance tour that will travel through the Midwest and Deep South. They should be able to get back home on Christmas Eve, assuming all goes as planned. Tony refuses to work as his butler and driver when Don describes the position to him. Don decides to pay Tony more because he believes Tony can shield him from the tremendous racism he would undoubtedly encounter. Tony, though, declines and turns away. Later that day, the pianist gives Tony's house a call and requests Dolores' approval to send her husband away for 8 weeks. Tony consents to go with him in exchange for $125 per week. Dolores bids him farewell on the day of their departure and encourages him to keep writing to her later in whichever city they reach in during their journey. The record label gives them a lovely vintage car to rent, and tells Tony that he will only receive half of the money, and the rest will be given to him after the tour is over, most importantly, when he fulfills his assigned duties. They give him something known as the Green Book. It's a travel guide for African Americans that includes a list of secure accommodations in the segregated southern states. Tony finds it astounding that a book of this kind ever exists. As the trip begins, Tony first irritates Don with his ceaseless talking. Furthermore, Don finds Tony's use of ridiculous terminology and poor grammar particularly annoying. He finds it absurd that he would eat with his hands and often needs to relieve himself in the middle of the road. Tony is among many who are impressed by Don's outstanding performance in his debut appearance. Tony begins to value him as a musician. Later, while he waits for the concert to end, he is discovered gambling with the assistants. Don interrupts him, feeling let down that he neglected to stay at the party, and went outside so he looked for him but couldn't find him. Later, while on their journey, Tony turns on the radio to listen to modern music. He learns that Don is unfamiliar with well-known performers, such as Aretha Franklin, who is particularly well known in the African American community. After some time on the road, they come across Kentucky Fried Chicken and Tony admits he has never tried it, so he stops over and buys a bucket. While eating, Don is disgusted by the way he eats, but later Tony forces him to eat the chicken with hands as Tony is doing, and surprisingly he likes it. In other scenes, when they stop over for refreshment, Tony discovers a pricey jade gemstone on the ground. It appears to have fallen off a rock seller's cart. Don calls him out right away after he pockets it. The pianist requests that he immediately go inside and pay for the rock. Tony moans and complains, but he still goes through with it. The two then arrive at the second location, where Don's grand piano is not properly cleaned. According to the racist caretaker, someone with a Negro back would have no trouble playing on such a piano. Tony becomes upset over the remark and punches the man in the face. Next, in preparation for the performance, the piano is cleaned and polished. Don's accommodations become exclusive to black people as they travel further south. So they have to get different accommodations for the night. While he is in his accommodation, he doesn't feel at home despite being with his people. He visits a pub that evening, where he is attacked by a group of whites simply for entering the establishment. Tony appears, claiming to have a gun, and he starts threatening the goons until they set him free. While they are outside, Don questions him about his gun ownership, but Tony says he was simply bluffing. They then head to the hotel together. Later, they make a stop at a southern estate for the following concert. As always, Don commands everyone's respect and is the life of the party. He is accustomed to this environment despite being the only African American male. The main visitor is even given a special dish of home fried chicken as requested, following the tasty KFC he had while on the road, but later, he is stopped from using the white people's restroom at the break. The host points him in the direction of a little wooden cell outside the home. Don, not allowing to be degraded, he heads back to the hotel for a quick restroom break before rejoining the performance. Tony is enraged to watch Don show consideration for those who denied him even the most basic human decency. Tony writes Dolores letters along the trip, but they are usually terrible. When Don reads them, he notices numerous grammatical and spelling errors. He assists Tony in making them more exquisite and lyrical. When Dolores receives the letter back in New York, the letter's beauty makes her cry. In the scene that follows, the two are making their way to their next location when they notice a dapper suit on display in front of a shop. When Don comes in to buy it, the shop owner won't allow him try it on, claiming they are only made for whites. It is evident that the man is making assumptions about him based on the color of his skin. Don kindly leaves, and this makes Tony realize the challenges he faces. Later that night, Tony receives an urgent call that evening from the police station asking him to come in. When he arrives, he sees Don and a naked man in a cell. As it happens, they were discovered having pleasure relations. Tony is forced to bribe the police to let Don go. But ungrateful Don argues that since the police were in the wrong in this instance, he was wrong to bribe them. Tony labels him as ungrateful. In the scenario that follows, Tony bumps into two of his Italian buddies from New York while they are outside a hotel. They request some decency from him because they notice he works for an African American man. Even a higher paying job is given to him. But Tony stresses he is fine. Don thinks he is going to consider their offer, so he requests to pay him twice as much money later that day, and elevates him to the position of travel manager. Tony declines to take any more money and admits that he never intended to leave him in the middle of the concert. Don appears genuinely moved by his remark. While traveling to their farewell performance in Mississippi, the two are stopped by the local law enforcement. It turns out that Americans are not allowed to be outside after sundown in that particular area of the town. When the policeman extracts them from the vehicle, he racially disparages Tony for being Italian. He becomes enraged and strikes the officer, which ultimately results in their arrest. While at the police, Don asks for his rights to a telephone, which is granted to him, so he calls someone. And after some time, the governor calls the police. He is clearly furious and orders them to release Don as soon as possible. Don's influence forces them to free Tony and Don at the same time. Don discloses that he made a call to U.S. Attorney General Robert Kennedy outside. Don feels ashamed that he put the U.S. Attorney General in this petty situation, and he stresses that had Tony controlled his anger, none would have happened, but Tony is thrilled and moved by the encounter. Given that they would now be late for the last show, he is enraged at Tony. He is upset that Tony was unable to take the taunts that he has endured his entire life. Tony refers to Don as a naive wealthy man who is unaware of the hardships his own people endure, which sparks an argument and ends the talk. Frustrated, Don storms out of the car. He has spent his entire life being perceived as too white for black people, too black for white people, and not manly enough for being gay. He vents his annoyance to Don, who sympathizes with his situation and offers a silent apology. Tony writes his wife yet another letter while they are staying at a motel that night. Don is adamant about reading it even though he says he's gotten the hang of it by this point. Tony referred to his wife's home as a happy family in the letter. Smiles of approval are offered by the pianist, indicating that his writing has improved a lot. The next day, they reach the last Alabama concert. The host shows Don a tremendous deal of attention by allowing him to park his car in what he refers to as the guest of honor spot. However, he is shown to his dressing room, which is a little kitchen store. He accepts it without complaints, but later, when he tries to enter the dining room with the others, he is turned away. The host says they don't want anything from him personally, but the restaurant has a policy that does not permit black staff to enter the dining area. So, Don stands up for himself and tells the host he either eats with the others or he doesn't perform. When he hears this, he attempts to buy Tony over so he can convince his boss to perform. Tony is furious, and soon before he hits the goon, Don intervenes and he grants Tony the freedom to decide what to do: go eat somewhere else and carry on with the show, or end it entirely. Tony selects the latter, and the two of them head to a bar exclusive for black folks. A few goons notice Don when he flashes his wallet, which is full with cash. He fully enjoys his time, and when the bar attender asks what he does for a living following his fancy looks, he is hesitant to say, but Tony tells her that he is a professional pianist, so the lady asks her to perform for her customers, which he does with pleasure. He contributes to the local jazz band as a pianist and they fully enjoy the night. While going home, Tony notices the earlier guys waiting behind their car to steal from them as they are about to leave. He scares them away by firing 2 shots into the air with his gun. A stunned Don says, "I knew you had a gun all along," as he comes from behind him. The two set off to return to New York in time for Christmas Eve. The trip is made considerably more challenging by the snowstorm, but they have to drive through. Don asks Tony to fetch his lucky stone as they're going to need it for the ride. The two giggle over Tony's brazen decision to retain the stolen stone on the dashboard. Tony is exhausted from traveling nonstop for hours. He gives up trying to get home in time as he had promised his wife, but Don offers to drive while he relaxes for a while, and assures him they will reach home in time. Fortunately, they arrive at Tony's flat just in time for the family meal. Don declines Tony's invitation to come in, saying Merry Christmas as he leaves. Right now, Dolores and the family are extremely happy on his return. Tony's brother makes fun of Don while they discuss the trip, but Tony encourages him to be more polite. After some time, they hear a knock on the door, and Don has come back to be with them. He is warmly welcomed by the whole family. Hugging him, Dolores expresses gratitude for his assistance with Tony's letters. The film ends. If you've watched this far, thank you. Have a great day.